Hey friends, it's Jen. Welcome back to Simply Home and Harvest. I apologize for leaving you so abruptly in our last video on how to make your own sourdough starter. I had every intention of giving you the full bread making recipe and video at the very end of that, but you would have been sitting in front of your screen for an awful long time. So I decided to split it up into two videos. So today is kind of a part two. I'm gonna show you how to make a loaf of delicious sourdough bread using the starter that hopefully you created with me in our last video. If not, that video will be on a playlist. I'll try to make a playlist on bread making and you will have it to refer back to. And that way, if you need to make a starter or refer the video to your friend, it will be available. It's a very thorough step-by-step, day-by-day guide, so be sure to check that one out. I will leave a link to it for you below in the description box. So let's get started. We're gonna make a very simple, basic loaf of bread. I would call this the beginner's recipe of sourdough bread making. There are several more involved recipes that you can research online. Farmhouse on Boone is an excellent resource. Her channel has helped me so much in my sourdough journey over the years. So definitely check out her channel if you need more recipes on how to use your sourdough. But this recipe I found online a couple of years ago, and it's just very basic. It makes a quick loaf of bread. And when I say quick, I mean in about 10 to 12 hours, you can have yourself a loaf of sourdough bread because nothing about the sourdough process is quick. And that's a good thing. You want to allow your dough time to ferment and get all that goodness of the sourdough starter into your bread. You want to get all that nutritional goodness out of your sourdough. So you don't want to rush the process. You definitely want to have a good foundation for your sourdough bread. So now, we need to make some bread, and I'm going to show you a very basic beginner recipe on how to make bread. All you'll need is a loaf pan and just a way to knead your dough. I'm going to use the stand mixer today just because it's here and that makes things a little bit easier on me, but you can totally do this by hand. So you're going to need very basic ingredients. You'll need water, your starter, which is very important, sugar, salt, some melted butter, and flour. That's it. Now you could eventually substitute your regular sugar for like honey or another sweetening agent of choice, but today I thought I would keep it really simple and just show you what I think most of you probably already have on hand. So we're gonna make this very simple bread. It only takes us about 8 hours probably before we'll actually be able to bake it. Depending on the fact that, you know, if you have a really active starter, that will make the difference there. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and get everything mixed together. I'm going to use my stand mixer mixing bowl. And in my mixing bowl, I'm going to add a cup of starter and melted butter. And I probably should get a measuring cup. So hang on. I'm going to spray mine a little bit so it'll be easier to pour out. Okay. All right, so I'm going to measure out a cup of starter, and I might end up making 2 loaves of bread because I think I would have enough, but you do definitely want to make sure that you've got enough in the bottom of your jar to feed and grow again. So you really want to leave about a half a cup of starter in your jar. So if you don't feel like you have enough yet, go ahead and feed it another time, let it grow a little bit before you use it to make your bread because you definitely want to make sure you've got enough left in your jar to continue. All right, so 1 cup of our starter going in. I'm gonna have a mess in this kitchen. All right, there we go. Just trying to get my stir stick there. All right, and then to that, we're going to add a tablespoon of melted butter that I melted in the microwave. I'm gonna give this a good stir just to mix the butter and the starter together there. All right, now I'm going to add the remaining ingredients to this, and you could probably do all these steps in your mixer if that's what you choose to use, but I just like to go ahead and get it mixed together and then put put it back in place to do the kneading process for me. So let's keep going. Next, we're going to add 3/4 cups of water, or 3/4 a cup of water. We're gonna need 1½ teaspoons of sugar. I'm just gonna use my white sugar here. And then we're gonna need that same amount of salt. I'm gonna use the pink Himalayan sea salt. So a teaspoon and a half of that. I'll have this recipe down below for you. It is one that I got offline a couple years ago, and I just find it to be a very easy and basic recipe if I want to do something quick. So this is not going to be like an artisan loaf of bread. This is just going to be one that you bake in a loaf pan that you can slice and enjoy. All right, and then what's left? Let's see. Our flour. That's all we have left. So we'll stir that together, and then I'm just going to add in 2 3/4 cups of flour. Now, depending on the consistency of your dough, and every dough is different, and every environment that you're mixing your dough in is different. So sometimes you might have a wet dough and you need to add a little bit more flour. Sometimes you might have a really dry dough and you need to add a little bit more liquid. So I've just kind of learned what the dough consistency looks like, and you want it to not stick to your bowl when you're kneading. You want it to come together where it has a good elasticity to it. And so I'm just gonna kind of give you an idea as we go along, the consistency that I like to see. All right, so we've got everything over to our mixer. And I've got my dough hook on here. And then we're just going to let this do its thing. And then we'll kind of be able to gauge a little bit better and see if we need to add more flour or liquid, or if that's going to be just right. And I'm gonna let that go for probably a good 5 to 6 minutes. Maybe as long as like 8 to 10 minutes. It just depends on the texture of our dough. All right, we kneaded our dough for probably a good 10 minutes. And I'm gonna try to get this closer to the camera over here and let you see. But basically it started to clean the sides of our bowl, and I could tell by the consistency of it that it was about right. Plus, also you don't want it to stick to your fingers. So if you're pulling at the dough or checking the dough and it's sticking to your fingers, then it's not ready. But you can see that I'm messing with this dough and it's not sticking to my fingers. So that's a good sign that we are at the right place with our dough texture. So let me just kind of show you a little bit. See how well, that wasn't a good example. See how we can stretch it and it's got some elasticity to it. And that's really where you want it. You want it to be able to be molded and stretched and not sticking to your hands. I hope that makes sense. But I think after you do it for so many years, it's kind of hard to explain that because you just know the feel of it. And I can just tell that this is gonna be good dough. And it smells amazing. That sourdough fragrance, aroma, whatever the word is. I can smell the sourdough. All right, so I'm gonna move you down here a little bit. Let's see. All right, so right there, I think you can see. We've got a surface that's lightly floured, and I've already greased my pan. Now you can grease a loaf pan, or I just put a little shortening in here, or you can line it with parchment paper. I've done it both ways. Today, I just thought we would go with the greased method, and then you're going to roll this out into a rectangle. Now you can use your rolling pin, or you could just use your hands and kind of shape this into a rectangle, which, you're just basically kind of folding over your bread. This is just putting it into simpler terms just to kind of explain that a little bit better. So this, you've heard of stretch and fold. This would be your stretch and fold. So we're stretching our dough into more of a rectangle shape. And then we're gonna kind of fold it into itself. Then we're gonna flip it back over and we're going to make it into a loaf shape from there. Now there are many different methods that people use, and they'll stretch and fold and knead and stretch and fold and knead, especially to get like more of your artisan loaves, but we're doing a very simple loaf, and so I'm showing you a very simple move. All right, so there we go. We got that nice little loaf with our sides tucked in. Now, I'm just going to put it straight down in our pan, just like that. Now you can push it down if you want to. I've done that both ways as well, and it still yields the same results. And we're gonna cover this and we're gonna let it rise until it has doubled in size. You want it to basically come up to the top of your pan. I don't like to let it get any higher than just about the top of the pan, because I don't want it to come over the pan and then it's going to rise a little bit when it bakes. So I found that it's nice just to kind of see the top a little bit, just rising over, but not the sides. We don't want the sides that high. Okay. So covering this, I'm going to use plastic wrap, and I'm actually going to spray the plastic wrap so it doesn't stick. And you're doing this because you don't want your dough to dry out, and it will if it's not covered properly. And I'm using this Glad press and seal because I had some of it, and I thought it might be easier to get out of the package for you to show. All right, so I'm going to try to do this without making too much of a mess. I'm just going to spray my paper. And then I'm going to lay it over the top, like that. And then as it rises, it's probably going to touch the top of that paper, but we should be able to peel that off very easily. And now I'm going to put this in a nice warm spot. I may stick it back in that oven with the light on, and we will check it after about 6 or 7 hours, but by 8 hours, we should be ready to bake this in our oven. So it's now pretty late in the evening, and I could probably let this rise a little bit longer, but I don't want to go to bed. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing prepped, and we're going to bake it in our oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. But before we do, I'm going to take a moment just to melt some butter again in the microwave, and I'm just going to brush that on top of our bread. That's going to give it a little bit more of a golden top. And typically I would, like I said, like to see the bread up to at least the top of the pan, but because we are making our very first loaf, and it may take some time for our starter to kind of acclimate and get to the point where it rises a little more quickly. So patience is key. Like I said before, if you're going to make sourdough, you're going to have to enjoy the process of it, and I would suggest maybe starting first thing in the morning or earlier in the day if you don't want to stay up late to deal with it like I did. So now that it's been baking for about 30 minutes, it's time to let it cool. Now this is the hardest part, I think, and you need to let it cool for about 15 to 20 minutes or longer if possible before you slice it. One more step, I do want to add a little bit more melted butter to the top of it. You don't have to do this. You could go ahead and eat it as is, but you will be so happy that you have taken the time to make this delicious loaf of bread, because that first bite will just make it worth your while. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. I hope this is helpful, and like I said, very basic. I think this is a beginner loaf of bread, and anyone can do it, and before long you'll be making all kinds of exciting things with your sourdough, from cinnamon rolls to muffins to English muffins, pancakes. There's just so many things that you can do with this beneficial sourdough starter. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, share it with your friends. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember to live simply, use what you have, enjoy the moments you've been given, and thanks so much for hanging out with me today. See you all later.